It's time for the WCW Monday Nitro main event of the evening.
This is where the big boys play, huh? Look at the adjective, play. We ain't here to play.
But as Donald Trump hangs onto the top of the Trump Plaza with his family under his other arm as they sink to the bottom of the sea. Thank God Donald Trump's a Hulkamaniac.
Inside cradle to DiPio. Yeah! A new heavyweight champion of the world has been crowned. Sting has upset Ric Flair.
Want everybody in here to take a good long look at this crap I'm in. Oh, my new name is Seven, by the way, so they've dressed me up like Uncle Fester.
And I don't mind telling you, I was wearing these $600 custom-made lizard shoes and this $13,000 Rolex.
It's good to have you, Nikita. It's just incredible because, you know, we've got to start here because we all miss sports so much. I know you're a huge Minnesota Vikings fan. We're here in Kansas City, and we may be celebrating the Super Bowl longer than we thought. We may be celebrating it on into eternity.
Apparently. Well, I will say this. I like your quarterback that much more now when I found out his dad played for the Minnesota Twins. Just FYI.
He did. Pat Mahomes was a twin. Yeah, he was a twin. But I mean, I don't know. The Vikings have a solid roster. You trade away Stephon Diggs. Kirk Cousins is the answer going forward. So we're just gonna have to kind of wait and see. The Vikings have always been kind of on the cusp, you know. For
I know they're like like one player away from making. But yeah, no, you're good. That's good. That's good.
Hey, we'll take it. Our first one in 50 years. You know, we'll have to take that onto. But, you know, what's always been so interesting to me about your career, because, you know, you're from Minneapolis, obviously, but the crop of talent that came from the Minneapolis area at that time, the Road Warriors, Kurt Hennig, Jesse Ventura, Ric Flair, Iron Sheik, and Barry Darsow, your future running mate. What was it about that time and place? Minneapolis produced so much wrestling talent. Just because Vern Gagne in the area? Like, what?
I don't think Vern had really anything to do with it. It's just you left. Let me throw a few more names into the pot there. Z-Man, Tom Zink, Nord the Berserker, Ravishing Rick Rude. I mean, the interesting thing is, not only was it a mecca for professional wrestling, I mean, it was a mecca for sports in general. One of our friends from high school opened a gym called The Gym, and we had everything from professional wrestlers to world-class power lifters, world record holders, bodybuilders, Mr. Minnesota, Mr. World. I mean, it was a mecca of athletes in general. But that said, just out of Robbinsdale High School, just out of the one high school, we were all together in school at one time. Ravishing Rick Rude, Kurt Hennig, Tom Zink, Nikita Koloff, John Nord, Barry Darsow, and the lesser known was Brady Boone. But all of us were in school at one point all together, and some of us on the same football team one year. So yeah, pretty crazy to think. And little other side note there, two other graduates of Robbinsdale High School, of course, prior to us. Vern Gagne and Mean Gene Okerlund were graduates of Robbinsdale High School as well. So, yeah, I don't know. You know, Wayne Bloom, Mike Enos. I mean, there's so many. The powerless Scott Norton. I mean, gosh, the list just keeps going.
Well, not only that, you had Kurt Angle and Shelton Benjamin come out of the University of Minnesota in more recent times. So there has definitely always been kind of a lineage there. I mean, did it create kind of a professional rivalry? I mean, you guys all wind up most of you in the NWA at the same time. I mean, the legendary matches with the Road Warriors, the things you did with Barry Darsow being kind of your running mate there, Crusher Khrushchev. What was there was there kind of a rivalry going on there? Like, I know you guys probably all played football against each other. It's just kind of had to be kind of a crazy thing.
Well, I mean, again, Henning, Rude, myself, and Nord, the five of us who all played on the same football team in high school. Now,
that's insane.
Now, Kurt and I, yeah, it really is. Now, Kurt and I actually, our freshman year in college, our teams played against each other in the state championship. And he blew out a knee, which is what led him into wrestling. That ended his football career. Was he blew out a knee in college and headed into wrestling. But like Animal, for example, you know, he went to a school called Irondale. Well, I ended up recruiting Animal out of Irondale to come play college football with me, and then I guess turnabout is fair play. A few years later, he makes the phone call to recruit me out of football to come into wrestling. So kind of a interesting little side note there.
Yeah, that's right, because you were on the verge of trying out for the USFL at the time. And so when this happens, how does it become that you're going to be this killer Russian character? I mean, Jim Crockett, I guess, kind of gave you the name and stuff like that. But to come in, that really hadn't, you know, you had Ivan Koloff, of course, the Russian Bear. But this look and everything about the character, how did that kind of come to be?
Yeah, just really just timing, right? You know, the old expression, timing is everything, and you recognize the time. And, you know, Animal called me one morning, and it actually, Don Kernodle, who was Ivan's tag team partner, they were the world tag team champions at the time, and Sergeant Slaughter actually came up with the original idea of a nephew for Ivan, and laid out probably a whole 2-year storyline, presented to Jim Crockett, and they said, yeah, I'm interested if you can find the guy. And so Don Kernodle approaches Animal, and he simply asked this question: hey, do you know any big guys who wouldn't mind shaving their head and becoming a Russian? and Animal goes, yeah, as a matter of fact, I know the guy right now, you know. So he called me. I called, you know, he told me the story. I go, do they know I have no amateur background, no professional training, like whatever, like I hadn't even hit a ring rope? And he said, I told them, they said they didn't care. You know, it was at a time they were looking for some new talent. And so I called Jim Crockett, had literally a 5-minute conversation, sight unseen. Those weren't the days of cell phone selfies and sending a picture through your phone. And I had a 5-minute conversation, made sure he understood that. And then I just walked into his office the day he said to be there. About 2 months later, introduced myself, and Nikita Koloff's born in the hallways of Charlotte, North Carolina that day.
Well, the territory is super hot at this time. Jim Crockett Promotions there in the Mid-Atlantic area, and you immediately get into some huge feuds. And I mean, you come in like, well, and obviously your uncle, Ivan Koloff, who of course has since passed away. How important was it? I mean, did you guys kind of travel together, and how important was that kind of as far as learning the wrestling business kind of on the fly with him?
Yeah, it was trial by fire. And actually, just a little clarification, that summer of '84 that I came in, actually the territory was not on fire at that point. Summers are always kind of a little bit slower anyway in the Mid-Atlantic, but that's why they were looking for some infusion, some new talent, some things to spark a fire. And because there were plenty of nights I wrestled in front of 50 people, you know, in an auditorium. But that said, it was trial by fire, because I'm born in the hallways that day. They put me right in the interview set with Ivan and Don, shirt off, don't talk, you don't speak no English. And then we finished those hours of interviews. They said, be in Raleigh tomorrow night, North Carolina. You're going to wrestle at the Dorton Arena on television, having never been in a ring, as the nephew of the Russian Bear, Ivan Koloff. So we have the match, short 11-second match. I get my first win in professional wrestling. And then for the next 2-3 months, to Don and Ivan's credit, we would get to the towns early, 2-3 hours early. They would bump all over the ring and teach me the mechanics of wrestling. And then I'd sit in their corner. Ivan would sit in my corner. And then, I'd watch their match. Ivan would watch my match. And on the way home, we would then talk about what is no longer there, but the old school psychology of wrestling. And that's how I learned those first, 2-3 months. And fortunately, I was a good student, I guess you'd say, and adapted rather quickly.
Well, absolutely. And then when I think of the territory being hot, I think about like, I guess more, you debuted in 84. I'm thinking more like 85, you think about Starrcade
Yep.
85, you guys
Yep.
in a major role there. 86, you're wrestling Ric Flair. But so talk about the tag team division at the time, because not only do you have the Russians, you've got the Rock and Roll Express. And I think it was Tully Blanchard that coined the phrase, if you want to start a riot in the South in 1985, beat up Robert and Ricky. And you guys did a lot of that. So what was the heat like at that time for the Russians? Of course, this is like right post Rocky IV, so it's Cold War time, of course, too. And then these tremendous tag teams that the NWA had at that time. Just talk about kind of running around with some of those guys.
Yeah, like Ivan and I took the belts off of, like they recently last month posted whatever day it was in March that Ivan and I beat Dusty Rhodes and the Raging Bull, Manny Fernandez, for the tag team belts. And then they brought Ricky and Robert into the territory, and so again, trying to spark something. The Rock and Roll actually at a little show, I think it's Spartanburg, South Carolina, or won the belts, but then we quickly won them back, because we wanted to try to get them over for those fans to fall in love with them. And then of course that led to the big match at Starrcade where they won them back. But some great teams. I mean, back in the day, Mark and Jay Youngblood, and I mean, Ricky Steamboat was always partnered with some good guys, and eventually it would be Rick Rude and Manny Fernandez, the Raging Bull, would do some tag teaming. Of course, the Midnight Express, right, with Jim Cornette, and so yeah, we had some really great talent, just overall talent here. Not to mention tag teams only, but just great overall talent. A stable of wrestlers that we began to compile over that heyday of there, which you're talking about 85, 86, 87, 88 into that era. Yep.
Well, absolutely. And in 1986, you start a feud with Ric Flair, and very famous, of course. I just watched the match from Starrcade '86, which was the Skywalkers event, and that ending in a double disqualification. But you talk about the challenge of that, because you were kind of turned babyface for this. Was there a challenge being a Russian character turning babyface against Ric Flair, the best heel maybe ever known, and yet he can cut these really cool over-the-top promos, and you're limited? And kind of what you can say to him what was the challenge in the build-up to that title match?
Well, I'm gonna back you up by a year, because I break into the business June 1984.
Mm-hmm.
They build me into this monster Russian machine, and that leads to the very first ever Great American Bash in July of 85. And I am billed in the main event against Rick. Of course, I'm the heel. He's the baby face at that point. And so that was my first introduction to Rick. And that's only, keep in mind, that's only 13 months after the day I walked into the office in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Yeah.
And I'm already the world tag team champion, world 6-man tag champion. Now I'm wrestling for the world heavyweight belt against the Nature Boy, who I've said over and over and over again, Rick was a consummate professional, could make the broomstick look good because he made me look good that night. So that actually kicked off this long-standing feud with him and I that then led into Starrcade '86, but now flipped. Right now, I'm the good guy, the baby face. He's the heel, and all that to say, it was different. In fact, when Dusty and Jimmy first approached me about turning babyface, I was hesitant, and because we'll back up one other little backstory. You asked what was it like in those days of being the Russian Cold War. I had 6 different matches where fans jumped the barricade, tried to climb in the ring. One actually, in fact, at that American Bash in '85, you watch the old film, you'll see a fan actually pin me against the ropes momentarily. That was the first one. 6 times, 5 against Flair as a heel. Fans came after me. 1 time against Magnum TA up near his hometown in Virginia. And so to flip and go the other side, I thought, well, Dusty Rhodes, Jimmy Crockett have a lot more experience at this than me. If they think it's going to fly, then why not? And so, of course, history it proved itself to be a good move in the sense of the sellout business that Dusty and I as the Superpowers did for the next 2 years. And then all the matches of the Superpowers and the Four Horsemen Superpowers and Road Warriors against the Four Horsemen. I mean, of any combination, 1, 2, 3, or 4. I mean, we did business everywhere we went. It was incredible.
Well, and that was like the original Match Beyond, the original War Games that were at the Great American
Correct.
Bash. I mean, you were involved in that whole tour in '87, and then again in '92, another War Games match.
Correct.
Those matches were brutal. What was it like being a part of those? You were a baby face, I believe, in both of them, but you were on Sting's team in '92, but with Dusty and the Road Warriors in those first ones. I mean, those were some brutal confrontations there, and the heels always win the coin toss, of course.
Imagine that. How did they always win the coin toss? I never figured that one out.
I keep betting against that, and I keep losing. I know I keep betting against that, and I keep losing. So, I mean, we're due.
Again, just great psychology that's no longer there, but involved in the business. But just a tremendous psychology, and to Dusty Rhodes' credit, American Dream, ingenious of not only the War Games, but even the best of 7 against Magnum TA and many others I was involved in, but Great American Bash and otherwise. But to answer your question, the very first one creates the most memory for me because of just, I still recall how electrifying it was there in the arena that night, and just the anticipation, especially with them having won the coin toss, always having the 2-on-1 advantage or 3-on-2 or 4-on-3. So it just heightened the atmosphere and the eventual outcome and the uncertainty of it all. And having never seen anything like that prior, that first one is by far the most memorable, but all of them were highly competitive and very, I feel, entertaining and fun to be a part of.
Well, it's funny you talked about fans coming over the barricade, rushing into the ring. I mean, we don't condone that, of course, for any match, at any point. But I'm trying to think of a wrestler that I would least have wanted to do that to, and it might have been you. I can't imagine the guy, Gusto. I mean, okay, it's one thing if it's Sam Houston or somebody, but like Nikita Koloff, Russian Nightmare, like I'm not getting in that ring at all. I can't believe. Hopefully you gave him stretched him a little bit or something.
well, for the record, I'm pretty confident. In fact, I know for certain the one that came after me when I was in the ring with Magnum had a few bottles of courage under his belt. So I'm pretty confident they weren't in their actual state of mind when they considered coming after me. But for the record,
you talk about Magnum. You had some a great feud with him over the United States title, but of course that spot we talked about in Starrcade '86 was supposed to be Magnum taking on Ric Flair and going over as the new champion. Just kind of what were your thoughts on Terry Allen? It seemed everybody talks like such a great guy, tremendous in-ring talent, and so unfortunate that his career got cut short there, although it did, provided you that opportunity there at Starrcade.
Yeah, it is. Of course, unfortunate for sure for that to happen. I mean, we're still friends to this day. We still travel. We do some things. We'll do some road stories together from time to time, and some ministry together from time to time as well. But it's certainly a tragedy, but we turn tragedy into triumph, and by that meaning, it opening the door of opportunity for me to become Dusty's partner and have that run as a babyface. But that's probably the best of 7 is probably the most talked about of all the fans when I'm out doing Legends, autograph signings, etc. Is the best of 7 series.
Yeah, it certainly is. And it's, for me, My indoctrination to you really, because I'm 36 years old, so I came up in the late 80s, early 90s when you were just coming back to WCW, feuding with Sting and Lex Luger and those. I remember watching Great American Bash '91 and being just so horrified that you would beat Sting in a Russian chain match. You guys had a great feud, though, Luger and Sting, and I think you've gone on record before saying you and Sting are the only two people that actually liked Lex Luger, although I heard here today that he's also become a Christian, and he's a much different person today as well. So glad to hear that from Black.
Yeah, I mean, another interview just recently, and we that comes up. We talk about that. Yeah, it is all right. I do kind of half jokingly, tongue in cheek, saying, "Yeah, I'm one of the few guys who actually did like Lex back in those days, for sure." But anybody who knew him then, for the record, and who would be around him now, in my heart of hearts, has to walk away going, he is not the same guy. And as I told on a previous interview, one of the other interviews, that what led to that transformation was April 23rd, 2006, when a jail chaplain, led him to the Lord, and he surrendered his life, and that he is just evidence of a genuinely changed life. That's the difference between who he was then and who he is now.
Well, the same could be said for Shawn Michaels, Ted DiBiase, yourself. How did you wind up finding the Lord, and at what point in your life?
It was after wrestling. I didn't grow up in Moscow, as everyone's figured out. I didn't grow up in church either. But I, like I said, I knew the stories. I mean, right, we're getting ready to have Easter here soon, and a lot of people will be celebrating the resurrection of Jesus over Easter, right? And so I knew the stories. I knew that story, crucified on a cross, and spikes driven through his hands and feet, and a spear through his side. But I just knew it. I would say intellectually, I knew it in my head, but that didn't impact my life. And it wasn't until 11 months after I left wrestling, 17 October 1993, that through meeting a Christian couple through business ventures outside of wrestling, who had invited me to their church, and I showed up one day. I said, "Hey, I'll be there Sunday," and they met me there. And it was the day that, and it was an interesting time period of my life, because I left wrestling. I'm pondering the future, wondering what the future holds, and my conclusion was this: I was successful, having had this, wrestling career. So I was successful, but I was unfulfilled. I could just sense, I'm at the top of the world as a world champion. Going, is this it? Is this all there is? And all that to say, on that day of 17 October 1993, when I went to the altar and got on my knees and gave my life to Jesus, that I could truthfully say, there was just all of a sudden I flooded with a sense of fulfillment on that day. And if I had died that day, I would have died a fulfilled man. And I think what's happened with some of these other guys, I know by their own testimony, Sting and others, that you can have everything there is to offer in the world, all, as Lex says, all the baubles, the bling bling, and the ching ching. But man, it's still, at the end of the day, for many of these guys, realized they were still empty inside, and the only thing that filled that void was surrendering their life to Jesus. And it's not just wrestlers, just people in general, right? But that's what led me to the altar for my transformation.
Well, that's a wonderfully said, and especially in trying times like this. I mean, this impacts everybody, of course, but people like you that, like you said, you kind of do a lot of the legend stuff. That kind of stuff gets put on hold. I mean, this affects everyone so many different ways, but all the wrestling business, especially, I mean, WrestleMania is going to be in an empty performance center. I mean, this is just very strange times we're living in, and all I guess we could say is, we just got to get through it together, right?
Yeah, just weather the storm. I've been posting some things, trying to help as best I can, keep people positive on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. And for those who might want to follow me, just look for Nikita Koloff with the number 1 behind it. That's the real me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, if you want to find me on Facebook, look for a picture. I'm standing in a river, and who's in the photo with me is the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, and a friend of ours, Jason Sanderson. We're actually in the Jordan River in Israel baptizing each other.
Wow.
Yeah, and so that's the real me on Facebook. You find that picture. But that said, I've tried to just post some very positive things, and I do a video kind of once a week, more or less now. And then the other day I said, look, this too shall pass. I mean, and if you pull back and take the drone look of it, in other words, hover over the earth with your drone and just try to look at the bigger picture. We look back, this will be a blip on the radar. And as much as it's challenging and difficult for all of us right now, eventually this too shall pass. And hopefully we'll all be better because of it. We'll all have a better perspective on life, the value of life, and really appreciate life itself, as well as family, friends, and others moving forward from all this.
Well, I appreciate your kind words during all this. It's very welcome, especially from people that, a lot of us grew up admiring and watching, and that certainly is the case. And there's so much more we could talk about. I mean, I've been such a student of the game for so long, and your career sort of emulates and goes right along with my time watching the business. But last kind of thing here as we wrap it up, you've never had a WWE run, of course. Many fans feel like that you should be in the WWE Hall of Fame. I mean, you think about like the Freebirds are in there, the Rock and Roll Express, and none of them had WWE runs either. What is your thoughts on that? And do you think that that might be something in the future for you?
My thoughts are, I would love to see Uncle Ivan in the WWE Hall of Fame long before I was ever considered, or if I never got in there. I think he earned it with the length of his career, his commitment to the wrestling business, his defeat of legendary Bruno Sammartino in the legendary Madison Square Garden that almost caused a riot. That if anybody deserved of being in there, that it would be Ivan. And and I'm fortunate. The Dan Gable Wrestling Museum and up in Waterloo, Iowa, I was inducted into that Hall of Fame. I think 2006, I believe, and the NWA Hall of Fame 2008. So that would be my response to that question. Put Ivan Koloff in there, and if I never get in there, I'm good with that too.
Well, thanks so much for coming on and doing this with us today. It's a true pleasure. Definitely look forward to continuing to follow you on social medias, and just looking for that much needed, positive words and distraction, Nikita. And we'll definitely catch up soon. And good luck to your Vikings going forward. We're gonna get you a Super Bowl one of these days. I promise.
Hey, for the record, two things real quick for the record. Yep. I was cheering your Chiefs, just for the record, because I like Andy Reid. I was cheering your Chiefs, and also if people want to follow, they dial in to go on Koloff.org if you want to follow me on my website. So you read more of my whole story on there. So appreciate it.
Great bio. Koloff.org, and it's got whenever we return to normalcy, information about your dates and appearances, of course, on there, Koloff.org. So thank you so much. We'll definitely be in contact, and we can't appreciate it enough. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys. God bless everybody out there. Stay
God
safe
bless.
and healthy.
You bet.